Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
MAMASKATCH, a Cree coming of age, has already earned some wonderful praise. Therese Marie Malho, author of Heartberries, has called it powerful and overdue. She goes on to say, "The hard and brilliant life breathing on these pages brought me to tears, to joy, and to grace." Kirkus describes it as lyrically written and linked by family, compassion, forgiveness, and hope. MAMASKATCH sings out as a modern-day celebration of healing. Darrel McLeod is Cree from Treaty 8 territory in northern Alberta. His first book, MAMASKATCH, received the Governor General's Literary Award for Nonfiction. Before deciding to pursue writing in his retirement, he was a chief negotiator of land claims for the federal government and executive director of education and international affairs with the Assembly of First Nations. He holds degrees in French literature and education from the University of British Columbia. He lives in Sauk, British Columbia. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but please welcome Darrel.
Tanse. Darrel Lisiega so. Wahia omiskwachi waskahiga notsinia. Bertha Nigawi, Sunny Notawi. So I just did a traditional introduction of myself in my language, Cree, and our tradition is just to say where we're from and then to name our mother and father. It's good to be here with you, so thank you for coming out on a nice summer evening. And feel free to stick around and chat later. I have friends who told all of their friends who live in LA about the event, so if you happen to be friends of a friend of a friend, I'd like to hear who that is. But if you're not, that's fine too. It's just lovely for you to come out. So what I thought I'd do this evening is talk to you a little bit about how I came to write the book, and then talk about the process of, then I'll do a reading, and then talk about the process of actually writing the book, and about some of the things that have happened since the book has come out. Does that sound okay? Yeah. All right, good, thank you. Well, the path to me writing MAMASKATCH was a relatively long one. I started, the book really starts well before I was born. The second chapter, Hail Mary, Full of Grace, is about the life of, the childhood of my mother and some of my aunts and great aunts, actually. And they were taken away to a residential school in Canada. We had a phenomenon there called residential schools. I think it happened in some places in the United States as well. And so children were taken at a very young age to spend 10 months, at least 10 months at a time in these schools. Sometimes children ended up staying for 10 years. And the goal, and this was official Canadian government policy, the official goal was to, the language they used in government, in the Parliament of Canada, was very dramatic. The purpose was to kill the Indian within and teach people a new way of life, to teach them a new language and assimilate them into a new culture. So the book starts there really with my mother's experience well before I was born. And then it goes into a time of my life when I was a baby. And one of the chapters called Machimantui talks about an experience when I was a baby when there was another phenomenon that happened in Canada called the 60s scoop, based on events that happened in the 1960s. So the government scooped up a lot of kids from Indigenous women who were single parents, and even just from poor families, and basically adopted them out to other families. And my family narrowly escaped the 60s scoop. And so the other story that takes place really early on is about that phenomenon. So I was born in a remote area of northern Alberta, and spent the first 6 years of my life living in my great-grandfather's trapping cabin with my mother. My father passed away, unfortunately, when I was sick. Mother was 6 months pregnant with me. And so we went to live with my great-grandfather in the woods. And there was no electricity or running water. And my memories of that time are idyllic. It was a beautiful place. Unspoiled land, really. It was before the oil industry sort of got entrenched there, the oil and gas industry. And so it was unspoiled nature with no electricity, no running water, and it was just our family, our extended family, aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins, hundreds of cousins. So I remember it as being quite idyllic. And my mother, in the early years, was an absolutely wonderful mother, the best doting mother anyone could ever have. So I write about all those things, and then I write about the transition that happened when the government of Canada and the local provincial government found out that there was oil and gas and gold to be had in the area that we live. They forcefully relocated us to another town. And then, of course, we had to go to school and learn English and all that stuff. And then our family just kind of was really impacted in a huge way, as you can imagine, our immediate family and then our extended family. And so I write about all of those changes that happened during those times. The story, though, there's a lot of triumph in my book, though. The story, Hail Mary, Full of Grace, is about my aunts, my great aunts, and breaking out of residential school, escaping, hatching a plan, and then delivering on it, and escaping from the residential school, and taking my mother with them, and never having to go back. So it's quite a triumphant story. One of the aspects of our culture that you'll find in my book quite frequently is humor. One of my good friends, who's also a writer, said that one of the things she liked about my writing style and the content of my book is that you find humor in places where you'd least expect to find it. And so it sort of helps to carry people through some of the difficult storylines. People ask me what I was trying to accomplish when I wrote the book and what the hopes were for my book. And I was really surprised by the answer that came out of my mouth when somebody asked me this I was nominated for another award called the Royal Bank of Canada Award for Nonfiction. And so they had a big gala event where I was one of the 5 finalists, and they had a big gala event for us and took us to Toronto for a week to celebrate, and for the 5 finalists to have time together was quite wonderful. But one of the presidents of the Royal Bank of Canada at a brunch meeting asked me directly why I wrote the book. What was my purpose? And I said, for the art of it. And I really surprised myself, but that really was my first goal. I have a degree in French literature, and so of course I had to do a lot of reading of comparative literature, French literature, Spanish literature, English literature from around the world, as well as English-Canadian literature, classical literature. And so I had entrenched in my mind, like you probably do as well, a sense of what literature is like as an art form. And first and foremost, I wanted to create a work of art. And it sounds like I've succeeded. That's the assessment that I've gotten from several different sources. Another goal that I didn't know I had until I was almost finished the book was that I was conjuring my loved ones who had gone to the other side, bringing them back to life. And that really worked as well. Just as I was finishing the book, one of my mentors who helped me with some of the editing made that observation one day. She called me up and said, "Darrel, do you realize what you've done with this book? You've brought back to life your loved ones who are gone." And she was absolutely right. I did do that, and that's one of the victories of the book, is I was able to do that successfully. And when I got the book, it was a very emotional moment because I felt that. I live in a little house in an isolated area on Vancouver Island, and southwestern part of British Columbia, not far from Seattle. And I was at my little house. It's an acreage. There's a long, winding driveway up to my place, and I was there by myself, enjoying a summer day, enjoying the forest and the sounds of birds and the ocean. And this young man came sauntering up my driveway carrying a box, and I wasn't expecting anybody or any delivery. So I thought, who is this, and what is this? What's going on? And so he just came to me and handed me this box and got me to sign. And then I opened it, and there was my book. The final covered version of it. In Canada, it's a hard copy book. And I just took that book and I just held it to my heart. And you know, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but I just had a spell of sobbing. I was just overjoyed and overcome with emotion. It was absolutely amazing. Another goal for my book is healing. I knew I wanted to write the book to help others heal, but I didn't realize the extent to which writing the book and then distributing the book, I didn't realize how much it would be a healing experience for me. It's been absolutely wonderful. One of the things that you do when you write a memoir is you do an inward journey, and I think that's one of the big differences between writing a memoir and writing an autobiography. Because you really are getting in touch with your soul. You're doing a deep journey inward, and that's what you're writing about, and that's what you're trying to share. More than, you know, experiences that happened on a certain date in a certain way and that sort of thing. And so I did that journey inward, and it was tremendously healing. I got to examine my relationships with, first and foremost, I guess, my relationship with my mother, my relationship with my older brother, who then became my older sister, underwent a transgendered operation and procedure, and with my older sister, who also went through some incredible drama in her life, and surprisingly with my father, who, like I said, had passed away before I was born, but the writing process really made me think about my father more and sense his presence more, and actually led me to grieve my father's loss like I had never done. It didn't occur to me. I mean, I didn't physically see him, and so that was a very powerful and healing thing. So it was quite wonderful. A few of the idea for writing the book, the motivation sort of came in waves over the years, and started very young when I was in second year university. There's a wonderful Canadian author you may have heard of. Her name is Margaret Lawrence, and the book of hers that really spoke to me was called The Diviners. And I still remember the opening line. It's a simple line, but a very effective line. It's, the river flowed both ways. And it just captivated my imagination in so many ways. And then reading the book, it's about the life of a writer, and that's what she does. She sits by her window, a big picture window, and watches the river and gets inspired as she watches the river, and then writes her books as she sits there. And I thought, I was about 22 years old, and I thought, that sounds amazing. I'd like to do that one day. I'd like to be that writer, sitting by the window watching the water, the movement of the water, and being inspired by it. And that's what I actually do. In my little house in Souk, I have a big picture window, and I overlook the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which is the body of water that lies between Canada and the United States, between Canada and the Olympic Mountains in Washington State. So I'm inspired by a different body of water than she was, but it's kind of like a river. As the tide comes and goes, the water moves in opposite directions, and sometimes, of course, when the tide is changing, it flows both ways. It's quite wonderful. So that was the first phase of my inspiration to write, and I just sort of tucked it away in the back of my mind, and it just stayed there, kind of dormant for quite a few years. And for a couple of years, and then there was another wave of inspiration. When I was studying French, I used to sit around talking with my French professors who became friends, a married couple, and they became mentors. They were quite a bit older than me. And after I told them some stories of my childhood and youth and about my family, they said to me that I should write my stories down because they were stories that only I could tell. And they were an important part of the Canadian fabric, Canadian history, that people should know about, and that certainly should be documented. And I really respected these people, and so that was another piece that I just tucked away and stored in my memory banks and in my heart for future reference, I guess. And then the third wave was when I really started writing, and it was probably about 15 years later. I had become a teacher and then a school principal, and I was working as a school principal in a remote community in northern British Columbia, an Indigenous community. 80 kilometers up a logging road from the closest town, a rustic logging road, and a community of 200 people on a beautiful lake in the mountains, and probably the favorite or the most treasured experience in my life was being there with those people. It was absolutely wonderful. And so, as you can imagine, there wasn't a lot of entertainment going on in that community, so we had time to sit around and talk in the evening. And we used to sit around and tell stories. And there was one elder, her name was Catherine Bird, and after I had told her a few stories from my childhood, she kind of lectured me. She sat up straight and said, "Darrel, you have to write these stories down." And she had a finger just like my mother. "You have to write these stories down. They'll help people someday." And it was one of those magical moments when I knew that it wasn't just Catherine Bird talking to me. It was the universe. It was a higher power giving me direction. And I knew then that I would definitely write. And I started writing. But I thought I was going to write stories for children, children's stories, short stories. And so that's what I started doing. And I would write a story of maybe 1 or 2 pages and then just tuck it away. And I did that maybe with about 10 stories. And I just tucked them away for years. And then when I knew I was about to quit working full-time, I had a very challenging career, which I write about in my second book, a fulfilling and rich career, but loaded with interesting challenges. When I knew I was about to leave full-time work, I decided to take a course in writing memoir at a university called Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. And I got an amazing instructor named Betsy Warland, who has become a friend and a lifelong mentor. And she had this technique for helping people to go within, to do some deep soul searching and dredge up rich experiences in your life and write about them in a really meaningful way. And examine what was really happening to you at that time. And how did the experience change you? And so writing memoir was about getting in touch with that, how poignant experiences in our lives change us. And then looking at how we remember those things and how we feel about those things now and what place those memories have in our lives now. Where are they? Where are those characters? Where do we keep them? How do we relate to them and the characters and experiences? So with that mentor, Betsy Warland, over about a period of a year, I wrote 26 short stories. And yeah, quite prolific. And it was all based on poignant experiences in my life. That was sort of the starting point, was identifying a poignant experience and then I'd write about it. And so Betsy helped me she gave a number of courses, and another course of hers was about dealing with manuscripts, how to cobble together a manuscript when you have all the various pieces that you would need, all the composite pieces. So I put together a manuscript, and one of the most painful parts of that work was a workshop where Betsy asked us to bring our manuscript in physical form, print it out, and then to spread it on the floor in this large room, kind of in the order we thought it would be put together, and then to take 1/3 to 1/2 of it out, to eliminate 1/3 to 1/2 of it. And when you put your heart and soul into something, it's a very, very hard thing to do. But it's a rich experience, and nothing is lost. I mean, she asked us to set those parts aside for future reference and maybe for use in something else. Because of course, every writer thinks that there were some brilliant pieces in there, right? Your favorite babies are in there, and you don't want to lose them. So cobbled that together, and then Betsy recommended that I work with a fiction writer to give my manuscript more depth, and things like better descriptive clauses, more thorough descriptions, better scene development, even throw in some dialogue if it was appropriate, and it was in many places. And then to look at the plot line, because even though it's the story of my life, there's still a plot line. So getting in touch with what would be the plot line of a book, and seeing how I dealt with it and how I portrayed it, and did I do a good job, and did it flow the way it should, that sort of thing. So with that, I'll launch into the reading. I'm reading from a chapter called Beyond the Athabasca, which is the last chapter of the book. And in this chapter, Darrel, his Aunt Rosie, and Uncle Charlie drive Darrel's deceased mother, Bertha, from Edmonton to Smith, a 2.5-hour drive north, because they didn't have the money to pay for a funeral home to transport the body and stay in Smith for 2 days for a wake or drive back and forth. Mentioned in this passage are Darrel's elder sister Debbie and her first husband Rory, who were Darrel's surrogate parents for a few years. Darrel's four younger siblings are simply referred to as the kids in this passage. So here we go, from Beyond the Athabasca. Just have a sip of water. Okay, from Beyond the Athabasca. Panicked jackrabbits did their zigzag hop pattern along or across the road, scarlet blotches and patches of brown fur every few kilometers. Soon their fur would turn white. I looked in the rearview mirror at the metallic gray coffin, then glanced at Auntie Rosie and Uncle Charlie sitting beside me on the bench seat. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had fantasized about a return to Smith that was filled with triumph, with Mother showing me off and bragging, "This is my son. He went to university. He's a teacher now, MAMASKATCH." But instead, I felt humiliation and shame coming on. Tongues would be wagging and clucking. It's Bertha Cardinal, remember her? She's the one who rode through town naked on a bicycle, shouting, "Lady Godiva rides again!" And that's her boy. What was his name? He looks healthy. Are those his real teeth? Her oldest girl died mysteriously, and her eldest son, Greg, well, he had an operation to become a girl, took some weird name like Katrina. Heavy gray clouds. The wind had picked up. Was it going to rain? Out of my side window, I caught a glimpse of the ditch. 4 crows settled onto a deer carcass. The speedometer read 110. I lifted my foot. There was no hurry. I turned briefly to Auntie. Who'd have ever thought we'd be doing this? Tapway. She smiled and nodded as she lit another cigarette. The sulfur from the match tickled my nose. I hope Mother doesn't mind riding with us like this. Ma. Well, better than in one of them hearses with them weird men in purple suits, Auntie answered. That's for sure. I know she'd rather be with us, I said with a dry chuckle. Uncle Charlie laughed. You guys are crazy. Well, Mother always did see the funny side of things. We passed the sign for Rochester. My grade 9 debating partner, Diane Sasnowski, had lived there. I wondered if she would remember me. Soon we would pass through Athabasca. I loved the rolling hills with their thick cover of spruce trees just before the town. So many days I had taken the kids for walks through there and down to the water to escape. As we watched the muddy river glide by, I fantasized about taking them to a place Rory and Debbie had taken me to, its source in the Rocky Mountains, where the runoff from the Athabasca Glacier fed into an exhilarating turquoise stream in Jasper National Park. I wondered if Mother had ever gone there. Then a torrent of bad memories, the time I had won the public speaking contest at school, but forced the kids to watch Love Story 4 nights in a row to avoid the drunken craziness at home. Oh my God, I had pushed Mother down the stairs there the year Debbie gave me my first guitar, and the spring day I abandoned the kids. I had cried on the Greyhound all the way to Calgary. I wanted this trip to be over so I could get on with my life, my beautiful life on the west coast. Athabasca, Island Lake, Hondu, then Smith. Smith. 2 nights there, that's all I could take. Then a day in Edmonton, then home, back to Vancouver. I fixed my gaze on the road. I thought about L'Étranger, the novel by Albert Camus that had shaken me in my second-year French course. The book's opening sentence was, Aujourd'hui, maman est morte. Today, mother is dead. Would I be like Meursault, the main character? He didn't cry at his mother's wake, and he went out partying the next day. The only thing that made sense to him in the whole experience was that nothing made sense. He didn't relate to any of it, the religious rites and doctrine, the staged mourning, the ceremony and burial. I hadn't empathized with his character when I first read the novel, but now, with each passing hour, I did. A luminescent green sign warned us that the Smith turnoff was 30 kilometers ahead. In 45 minutes, we would be there. I took my foot off the accelerator again, and he turned to look at me. Who the hell would do this? Who would drive their mother's coffin around in a cargo van? What would they say, all my relations and the white folks in Smith? Geez, can't even afford a hearse, or is he too cheap? And to think, his mother bragged about him being a teacher in Vancouver. I sighed and then mumbled, well, I guess things could be worse. Oh yeah? What you mean? Uncle Charlie took the bait. Well, I read a story in school about an American family who had to take their mother's body halfway across their county in a horse-drawn wagon to bury her in her hometown. It took them 9 days, and they almost lost the coffin twice. Once while fording a river, and then again in a barn fire. And to think they were flat broke. No money for embalming, and no ice or refrigeration. You can imagine the stench. Wow, it'd be awful, eh, Darrel? I guess we're lucky. Only a couple hours drive. Ma, is that where you got the idea? Auntie smiled. The random stands of spruce trees around the picturesque cemetery confirmed it. We were entering Smith. Clusters of children with dark skin moved off the road to let us through. Cousins for sure, even though they wouldn't know me. The cloud cover was thick, but I knew it wasn't going to rain. Another whirlpool of memories. LaFrance's General Store, now called something else, shopping with Mother for frozen hamburger and canned peas. Leonard LaFrance, the son's Smith's Prince Charming, never spoke a word to her and would shoo us kids away after we had spent our nickels and dimes on candy. The 3-story Smith Hotel Cafe, Jack Ma, Mother's friend and former boss. She used to chuckle when recounting how she used to tease him about his calling out of the menu each day, most tomato beef ham-bone steak, or at the Dominion Day Fair, peanut, popcorn, clacka-jack, jelly apple, and how he in turn kidded her about her English pronunciation and mimicked her awkwardness when serving tea and pie to the who's who of Smith. The night I ran to get Mother out of the bar because Uncle Andy was bothering Debbie, the interminable seconds it had taken for the bartender to come to the door after I rang the buzzer. We drove by the small wooden church, now painted blue with a simple white steeple. Mother had loved the original Gothic-style church, but it had burned to the ground the year after Greggy was assaulted outside of it. I still recalled Mother's terrified voice yelling, "The church is on fire!" at 5 a.m, followed by a resounding clang when the huge bell hit the ground. She and Ed had speculated over coffee that morning what a bad omen the fire was for Smith. Did the church burn because of Father Jal, I had wondered at the time? His foul mouth and bad behavior? Mother had hated him. "Coco's such a pig," she would say. "He went with my sister-in-law and then bothered me after your dad died." Tomorrow we would go to church. Tomorrow there would be a proper green hearse for Mother's coffin. Tomorrow at this time it would all be over. Well, almost over. First the church, then the graveyard. Then what? The longest night of my life, or would that be tonight at the wake? The stage was set. People had done this before. The furniture had been cleared away from the living room, and the sheer curtains were tied back to reveal the long, dark wooden coffee table on which Mother's coffin would be placed. Rows of stackable plastic chairs were set up facing it. Cushions for kneeling sat in a straight line on the floor. Candles of different shapes and sizes flickered all around. How eerily familiar it all seemed, just like in L'Étranger. Uncle Charlie directed how the coffin should be positioned. Odd music in the background, not the usual Johnny Cash or Loretta Lynn. When I recognized the da-da-da-da-da-da-da rhythm of habanera from the opera Carmen, I was sure I had become delusional. The women were busy in the kitchen preparing sandwiches and coffee for the wake. The men, my cousins and uncles, were watching TV in the extra bedroom, their eyes glued to the screen. I sat with them. It wasn't an illusion. The chorus had rallied behind a voluptuous Carmen as she sang, "L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser." I loved that line and remembered translating it for my good friend Milan. Love is a defiant bird that cannot be tamed. Thank you. Let's check how we're doing for time here. Okay. So I was going to talk to you briefly and then about what's happened since the book was released, and then we can have some questions and answers. The book was released in Canada in September of last year, September 2018, and it got really good uptake right away. I was invited to literary festivals in about 6 Canadian cities. I did 6 Canadian cities in 6 weeks in October and November. And then I was nominated for the Governor General's Literary Award for Nonfiction in November, and found out in December that I actually won it. And then I was nominated for another prize. But the experience of winning the Governor General's Award was quite something. I was alone at home in my little house when I got an email. I have this bad habit of checking my email first thing in the morning. I don't know how many of you do that. But I saw this email saying congratulations in the title, and I didn't want to stay home by myself to read it, so I went to the coffee shop where I do a lot of my writing and editing to be surrounded by friends, and then I opened it and saw that I had been nominated for this prize. And then a few weeks later, I was in Whistler, Canada for a writing festival, and I got a message at 7 o'clock in the morning to call Ottawa and the Canada Council for the Arts, so I did, and this young lady on the phone was really excited and was thrilled to tell me that I actually won, and that was quite something. That was a big day. That evening, I had to pull it together because that evening I had my reading in Whistler, and then I'm a jazz singer too, and I was also doing a jazz performance. So it was quite a day. It was a really emotional day, but that's become typical of the types of days I've had since the book has come out. It's the kinds of things that are happening are all positive, but all over the map. One of the coolest things was at a festival in Toronto, I was signing books afterwards, and I was the last one signing books, and everybody else had gone. And I was just sitting at this table, and I was just getting ready to pack up and leave, and this lady appeared out of nowhere. She was petite and she looked a bit frail, but when I looked into her eyes were lively and energetic. And during my presentation in Toronto, one of the things I do often is acknowledge elders, especially if there are a lot of elders in the room, and there were. So she thanked me for acknowledging elders. She said that was a wonderful thing to do. And I said to her, "Well, how old are you?" And she looked at me and said, "I'm 106. Yeah, it was pretty wild. So I went around the table, of course, and asked her if I'd have a hug. And she said, "Yes, I'd love to have a hug." So it was quite wonderful to hug a 106-year-old woman who wanted my book signed. And I mean, it was an inspiration to see somebody who was 106, and she was out on her own on a Sunday morning in the winter in Toronto for a book launch, a book festival. It was great. It was really quite amazing. Another day I got a call from a guy who's from the same tribe as me, and he has his own media business, his own blog and radio station and stuff like that. And he asked if he could come from Winnipeg out to Souk, where I live, to interview me, which is about a 2-hour plane ride. It's about $500 each way. So I said, sure, if you want to do that, I'd be happy, I'd be honored. And he said, there's one catch. I'm bringing my mother. She's an 83-year-old Cree woman, and she's a fluent speaker. And I thought, I use a lot of Cree in my book. The title MAMASKATCH is just the beginning. There are a lot of other Cree words. And so I thought I was in trouble. I thought she was going to scold me for incorrect usage of Cree. And so I was nervous the whole time. But she actually wanted to thank me for the book because it had brought her some healing. She was a victim of residential school. And when she read the story about residential schools and the victory that my great aunts and who would be her contemporaries experience, she just found it incredibly healing. But she also had some terrible experiences happen in the residential school that she had blamed herself for, and they happened when she was about 12 years old. And for 70 years, she had been carrying around this horrible guilt. And so I deal with the topic of childhood sexual abuse in my book quite extensively. And one of the things that I clear about is, it's the voice of experts that I've put into my book, and it's that children are never to blame. Children never are at fault when something like that happens. And so she just found incredible relief in that. And so she wanted to thank me for being candid and for dealing with a difficult topic like that in my book. It's also brought amazing healing with my family, which is, like I said earlier, has been really blown apart when we were relocated. 3 days after my book was launched in Canada, I got an email, well, actually a dramatic message on Facebook from the daughter of one of my first cousins. And my cousins all still live in our little village back home, and so there are hundreds of them. But we have a one-room library, and a librarian who maybe works half a day a month. But she found the librarian and told her her cousin had written a book and she needed it now. And the librarian brought it in within 2 days. And my cousin read it within 3. And then she made this dramatic posting on Facebook. My cousin wrote this book, and it's going to heal she said it could have been my life that was on the pages of that book. And it's going to heal our family and bring us back together. So that was wonderful. And then for the Thanksgiving weekend, Canadian Thanksgiving is earlier. It's in the second week of October, usually the first long weekend in October. And my family called me to come to Smith. They had heard about the Governor General's Award, the nomination, and so they wanted me to come home for a celebration. So I went home on short notice, and they organized a feast for me. 50 of my cousins came together and cooked moose meat and deer meat, rabbit, bannock, and blueberry pie from blueberries they had picked the summer before, and we just had an amazing feast. It was absolutely wonderful. And there have been so many other things. The passage I just read to you, I read it at an event in Minneapolis where I had my U.S. book launch a few weeks ago. And I don't know if you remember, but I read a passage about going through Athabasca, and this town was Rochester, and my grade 9 debating partner was from there, Diane Sasnowski, and I wondered if she would remember me. Well, I hadn't seen or heard from Diane Sasnowski since I left Athabasca at the end of grade 9. And as you can imagine, that was a few years ago. And when I got home back to my hotel room that night, I opened my Facebook and Messenger. There was a message from Diane Sasnowski. The same day I had done that reading, and it was just like something from the Twilight Zone. And it turns out a friend of hers had read my book and had read that passage and passed the book on to her and said, you have to read this book. And so she did. And we've been reunited, and it's like we've never been apart. She was a great support and a wonderful friend then. We were a great debating team. I think we should reunite. Maybe take on some politicians. But anyway, it's been an amazing ride. And being here with you tonight is a big part of that ride too. So thank you for coming out. Yeah, so we have time for a few questions or comments. Anything you'd like to say? Welcome. I was an adult when Mother died. I think it was I was about 28. Yeah. Thank you for coming. No, I don't. Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. So all of that is dealt with in the book, including why I don't have children, is dealt with quite extensively and thoroughly in the book. And it's not the reason many of you may think, but anyway, it's our family fell apart, our extended family, and then unfortunately, Mother ran into she had some difficult problems when we were little, and she ended up leaving home when I was only 10 years old. And the younger children went into foster care, my four younger siblings. But I went to live with my older sister Debbie, and she had already married. She was only 17 at the time herself, but she got married at age 15, and she was living with her husband, and she took me to live with her instead of me going to a foster home. I was very lucky. Yeah. Right. I've just started writing fiction. I'm writing my third book. I finished the manuscript for my second book, which is a sequel to the first one, about 2 years ago, and I submitted it to the publisher. I had a 2-book deal, so I knew they were going to buy it. And but the process is long. So while that book was stewing with them, I started writing my first work of fiction. And it's a very different process. I think in some ways it may have been easier to write it as fiction. There's less accountability, less likelihood of troubling anyone, because they think, well, it's just fiction. Maybe it happened and maybe it didn't. A lot of people do write fiction that's very autobiographical, and they won't say the extent to which it is autobiographical, but it's the story of their life, including famous writers like Alice Munro. There's a book of hers, I think the title is Who Do You Think You Are? That's quite autobiographical, apparently. So I might have had more latitude. I don't think it would have been as healing. And I don't think it would have gotten the attention it did. I needed to tell what happened to my family in Canadian society and how my family was impacted in Canadian, I should say North American society. Because it started with colonization by the British, right? And the British colonized all of North America and devastated all of North America in the process. So I wanted people to know that this was real, this was factual. This happened to real people. Another problem in Canada is that a lot of people know about the legacy of residential schools and colonization, but they tend to think that, oh, that happened. Why are you guys still whining? That happened hundreds of years ago. Like, why do you still have issues? And I wanted them to know it wasn't hundreds of years ago. The loss of our language, for example, my mother and father and all of my aunts and uncles were fluent speakers of our language. It was their first language, their mother tongue. Cree, or what we call it, Nehia. I speak some. I'm not a fluent speaker. My nieces and nephews don't speak any. So within 2 generations, our language in our family has been effectively lost. Fortunately, Cree is one of the languages in Canada that has a good chance of surviving because there are so many speakers, and it's possible to pick it back up. And I have been doing that. I've been teaching myself. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I needed people to know that this is real. So the residential schools legacy, the 60 Scoop legacy, the legacy of sexual abuse. I also deal with themes like suicide, youth suicide in my book, and I needed people to know that that's based on real lived experience. Hi.
On the subject of language and
Yes.
I was wondering that what's the feeling? Obviously, you've got such mastery of the English language, but you speak about the residential schools and the way that I mean, one of the ways of colonization was stamping out the English language. Like, is there a tension there, or what's the feeling when you're published and your whole craft and the whole thing you're trying to express is in English?
That's a wonderful question, and you're the first one that has asked it in all of the events that I've been to. But it's a very important question for me because I have a bittersweet relationship with English. I'm glad that I've mastered it, but it's also, my mastery of English has caused me to be ostracized by some of my people as well. Because I speak my English is an educated English, and to my people back home, to my cousins, it sounds refined. And it sounds like I'm being a snob or being elitist when I speak, the way I speak. But it's because of my brother-in-law who raised me for a few years. I mean, he used to drill me at the dinner table, and correct my English, correct my grammar, and correct my pronunciation. So I should be grateful to him that I speak a polished English. But it's been a bittersweet relationship. I've learned to speak French. I'm fluent in French and Spanish, and I feel much more comfortable personally, emotionally, speaking either of those languages. And one of the other things that my book has taught me, writing the book, is that Cree is my mother tongue too, because it was the only language I heard when I was growing up until about age 6, up until I started school. So everything would have been said to me in Cree. And so it's my mother language too. And part of the reason I'm learning it is I have this theory that I'll be more complete and that it may even affect my artistry. Because you probably know that mother tongue and learned languages second and third, and languages after second and third are on different sides of the brain. And so I have this theory that if I master Cree, it'll bring to life even more the artistic side of my brain. I'm hoping. That's a great question, and it's one I haven't discussed at all. Any of my events. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I'm going to leave you with a poem that I wrote. I was invited to an event in Montreal, Canada, and I was part of the opening ceremony, and for the opening ceremony, they wanted us to deal with the theme of social inequality, which is a big topic, but they gave us each 4 minutes. And so I thought, okay, well, how can I deal with a topic like social inequality in 4 minutes? And I had heard that there were going to be some, what do they call them, slam poets there, who would, so I thought, well, I'm a little bit old to be a slam poet, but I'll give it a shot. But I didn't do slam poetry. I wrote a poem, and I'm not a poet, so I apologize for this, but I wanted to do it. And it starts with a bit of drama. Oh, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches. That isn't part of the poem, but it sets the stage. My mother used to sing that in the wee hours after she'd had a few drinks. And there in our little shack, in a rural part of northern Alberta, northern Canada, it was ironic, her singing about a Mercedes-Benz and Porsches and all that kind of stuff. But I knew that it was her own little protest about social inequality. So here's my poem, and it doesn't even have a title. I don't need a Porsche, Mercedes, or Lamborghini. A Chevrolet or a dog sled will do. I can even travel on foot sometimes. I don't need soufflés, fondues, or portobellos, although I can enjoy it all and deserve to. I don't need equality or even want it. I just want the freedom, ability, and wherewithal to enjoy what is rightfully mine. My territory and all it brings to me, Mother Earth, traditional foods, knowledge, love, and healing. Don't get me wrong, please. I'm as hedonistic as the next person. I love luxury, abundance, possessing treasures. Just don't let your good fortune be at the expense of mine. There's enough for all of us. I don't need to hoard money or wealth, more than I could ever count or spend in my lifetime. Paper, Bitcoin, precious metals I can't eat or even take solace from. Give me back my honor, my dignity, and peace of mind. Then we'll be equal. When I can look you in the eye and make you be the first to lower your gaze. I don't need equality, or even want it. I just want the freedom, ability, and wherewithal to enjoy what is rightfully mine. My territory and all it brings to me. Mother Earth, traditional foods, knowledge, love, and healing. Ksamaga, hi hi. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.